my head. I've played so many Sonic games at this point that I feel like I'd write a freaking novel. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with Sonic the Hedgehog. Not only did I love this little blue dude, but the games were my absolute favorites too. Quality be damned.
Yes, but that alone is fish.
I was admittedly a massive fanboy growing up. Sonic was like my equivalent of a favorite superhero you look up to. But the series really did and still does mean a lot to me. It really did shape my taste in media a lot. I'm not that obsessive fan anymore, but I still love the series deeply. So, I decided to play nearly every single Sonic game on handheld and console that I had missed in the past. Sure, I played a decent number of these games in the past, but there was a lot of brand new, some of the hedgy games to trudge through. I've ranked all 57 games.
Quick post edit, there's actually 59 games. Apparently I don't know how to fucking count.
But just a few quick rules for this list to go over first. Number 1, no compilations. Sorry Sonic Jam, your 10-second long 3D tech demo is cool and all, but you don't count. Any games like Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. Sonic's in the forefront, mainly for advertising reasons, but it's more so of a Sega All-Stars game than a Sonic title. No Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, which is also kind of a Mario title too, and I really just don't want to fill up the list with these things. No mobile games. I'm sure there's some good ones out there, but I just honestly can't be fucked to worry about them. No Japanese exclusive arcade games. I don't want to emulate Waku Waku Sonic Patrol Car. Frankly, I don't even know if that's possible. And number 6, no edutainment. I don't want to learn things. I don't want anywhere near Sonic's schoolhouse. I mean, have you seen those things? Police? Yes, I suspect that this weasel thing has been eating children in Sonic's schoolhouse. No, officer, I have not been drinking rubbing alcohol. Well, I haven't since this morning. And finally, just keep in mind that this list is completely subjective. Everything is ranked by how I view these games, and my personal enjoyment of them. I don't claim to have the objective facts on the quality of any of these games. I'm not Silver the Smart Hog.
I see it!
It looks like Vegas! Why does it look like Vegas?
Sonic Blast Up the Ass, also known in Brazil simply as Sonic Blast, is a perfect joke of a game to start out with. To give this series credit, I don't even think a Sonic game with less effort has ever been made. If anything could be said about the previous Game Gear titles before this one, at least they looked nice and had actual thought put into their level design. This game is lifeless and ugly as fuck. It honestly looks unfinished in a lot of ways. Like, look at the way Sonic falls, it's so awkward, just look at this shit. Things like this really plain zone intro screen, it looks like some weird bootleg developed by a random Russian guy, I don't know. It really feels like this one was crapped out as a last-ditch effort to sell Game Gears and get something paired with Sonic 3D Blast, I guess? I mean, just look at the cover art. The only somewhat acceptable aspect is that the music is okay, and sure, it's somewhat more playable than some of the games coming up, but just look at how awkwardly Sonic goes around loops. He looks like he's about to shit himself at any moment. This game's more so just a pathetic excuse than anything else, so it gets to sit at the bottom. Oh, Magic 8-Ball. Will Sonic Free Riders really be as bad as people say? Oh wow, thanks a lot for the help, you fucking ball. I'll never forgive Sonic Freeloaders for making me buy a fucking Kinect, the product that loves to pretend that playing video games without any actual input could possibly be fun. Jokes aside, I was cautiously optimistic when I first started the game. During the tutorial, some of the basics worked great. Sure, I experienced irreparable back damage, but things like bending back and forth to turn, grabbing rings, and basic jumps honestly felt pretty good. But disaster struck when I had to do a spin jump, or turn in an angle wider than 20 degrees. The game can rarely recognize any of the more advanced actions that it requires you to do to get anywhere in the game. Even if it's slightly more playable than I expected, it's still an absolute mess. And it's really sad too, it didn't have to be this way. It probably would have been fantastic, but I honestly think that this game would have had some solid potential as a really good Sonic racing game if they just allowed you to use a fucking Hexpix controller! I'm done with you, Kinect, and I won't be looking back. For now. Sonic Labyrinth, unlike Blast, was at the very least trying something fairly new for the Game Gear Sonic formula. Too bad it isn't fun. The feeling of momentum is part of the fun of older Sonic titles, and it's honestly completely fucked here. It actually kind of feels like a shitty version of Kirby's Dream Course, with its isometric view, and considering how painfully slow Sonic's regular walking speed is, the spin dash meter feels fairly similar to the mechanics of a golf game. The first few stages are deceptively simple. As soon as I reached the first boss, I knew this game was completely screwed. Not only do you barely have any sort of control when using the spin dash, the hit detection can be really questionable. When you feel like you're actually in control, you're painfully slow. When you get to go fast, there's next to zero control. Feels like a good allegory for life, honestly, Sonic Labyrinth. Stop making me feel bad for my personal problems, you checkerboard Charlie. Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric. Sonic Boom was an odd offshoot of the Sonic series that was made to appeal more so to Western audiences. Yes, an offshoot aimed at Western audiences of a series that's already widely enjoyed by Western audiences. Brilliant. Now, don't get me wrong, the Sonic Boom TV series was actually surprisingly enjoyable. It's quite funny and honestly charming. Now, the series had 3 games in its short lifespan, the most infamous of them being Rise of Lyric on the Wii U. It would honestly take forever to go through all the reasons why this game is absolute dog shit, but the biggest of its issues certainly isn't lack of ambition, but boring gameplay, mission structure, ungodly dull environments, generic-ass music. It really was a failed experiment to turn Sonic into a Western-styled platformer. It really didn't work out at all, and goddamn does it have enough glitches to make Sonic 06 blush. The cool thing about most bad Sonic games is that you can still have some sort of weird fun with them. Unfortunately, Rise of Lyric really isn't the same way. Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood is yet another example of a completely failed experiment. I gotta admit that the idea of a Sonic RPG always sounded like a fun idea to me. Sonic already has spiky hair.
He's hair-colored.
Just give him the fucking massive sword and I'll be killing God faster than you can say snooping as usual, I see. BioWare was at the top of their RPG making game at the time. So I'd imagine this game's problems really largely come from a lack of direction, and we all know that Sega loves their ridiculous deadlines. This game honestly just feels unfinished in a lot of ways. The combat is slow as hell and a boring slog, which is definitely the very last thing I'd like to see in a Sonic RPG. The overworld is confusing, frankly, and a weird flat 2D plane that looks like it came out of some sort of ugly mid-2000s Newgrounds cartoon. And Jesus Christ, the overworld music is fucking terrible and sounds like it was composed by a confused child on a xylophone. Just listen for a few seconds. I think the music represents the game experience really, really well. Sonic Boom Shattered Femur for 3DS is considerably more playable than Rise of Lyric, but god damn, it's so boring. It at least knows the basics, that most people picking up a Sonic game want a relatively smooth experience and to run through stages. Faster than, at least 8 miles per hour, and without the frame rate totally shitting itself. This game suffers some of the same aesthetic issues as the Wii U version, but I had a better feeling about the faster pace of the gameplay at first. Unfortunately, the levels really overstay their welcome and feel like they're 10 gazillion hours apiece. And progression is locked behind finding really annoying to find items. Guys, come on, don't do this. I would have hoped that the developers would have at least learned a thing or two from Sonic Unleashed on that front. Yeah, this one just gets repetitive and dull real quick. It's not good. Hey, Magic 8 Ball. Will Sonic 4 be even better than I remember? You just love watching me suffer, don't you? I'm so sorry, Sonic 4, Episode 1. Oh, how I used to love you. Going back to Sonic 4 after all these years was like reaching out to an old friend from school. Your good memories chilling out with them, that'll be with you forever. But now he's a meth addict, who you found stealing people's wedding rings at the local subway station. Sonic 4 was supposed to be this big return for 2D Sonic gameplay, but going back to it, it just kinda sucks. Aside from the first zone, the level design in this one is pretty damn uninspired and frustrating. This is supposed to be a brand new experience, yet all of the locales just feel so familiar and flat. It's hard to explain without playing it yourself, but the physics are just so off. They feel completely wrong. So wrong, in fact, that they decided to rely on the added homing attack way too much. And honestly, it's so fucking ugly. From the barf-inducing graphics to the horrible, shrill Genesis remixed kind of music tracks it has going for it that really don't understand what made Genesis music so awesome. Looking back, this game is just god-awful. Sonic Shuffle is just worse Mario Party. Play this game with friends that you secretly hate. They'll secretly hate you in return, so you won't have to feel bad about it anymore. Sonic Drift is fine. It's just an average pole position style racing game on the Game Gear. Sonic's first ever racing game is perfectly acceptable, but the low-res 8-bit fake 3D can make it pretty frustrating. Like, a lot of these kinds of really early racing games sadly haven't held up that well, and this one isn't really an exception. Alright, so this one might ruffle some feathers. I'm sorry, but I fucking hate Sonic Forces. You'll have noticed that yes, it is indeed ranked below a certain other infamous Sonic title, you know the one. I want to make it very, very clear. Is Sonic Force technically worse than the other title? No, it isn't particularly glitchy, it does function fully as intended from beginning to end. But not only was Forces massively disappointing, but like a lot of other games at the bottom of this list, it's just so fucking boring, and that for me, even beyond overall quality, is a death knell for a Sonic title. Now, I've never ever been a decrier of the boost formula, because I've honestly enjoyed a lot of the Sonic titles that use the boost mechanic. I honestly do find it fun, but Forces is absolutely where this gameplay style wanders off and dies a sad, pathetic death. This game famously introduced what basically amounts to a Sonic OC maker. And while it was a fun little novelty at first, I kind of feel like Sonic Team put it in to try and distract players from the half-baked, nothing experience they made. Stages are way too short this time around. Just as soon as they start to feel interesting, that's when the level always fucking ends. Gameplay typically involves just running forward and holding that boost button. Classic Sonic's here for no fucking reason, with uninspired level design and horrible Genesis-style remix music. Again, just like Sonic 4. The soundtrack in general is just so flat in this one, which is not good for a Sonic game. For some reason, I do kind of enjoy it when it's separated from the game itself, but not when you're actually playing the levels. It's a weird, it just does not connect for me. It's not catchy when I'm playing the game itself. I only like it when it's separate. I don't know how to explain why that's the case. For God's sake, I could just complain about this game for a while. I didn't even mention the completely laughable story that's ridiculous even by Sonic game standards. Like, no, Sonic Team, I do not want to know about how Eggman's been tickling Sonic's feet for months, and I will stop there. I hate this game, but due to its technical qualities, I obviously couldn't put it any lower. Forces, I think, proves that Sonic Team has a hard time grasping what people actually love about the series. It feels like less than nothing. I honestly did enjoy Sonic Lost World on the Wii U, so I had decently high hopes for the 3DS version. But after playing it, I think they should have just, like, not made it? Like, I mean, the console version isn't perfect, it definitely has issues, but it never made me nearly as freaking frustrated as the handheld version did. To give the 3DS game some credit, it still retains some of the same overall graphical style I enjoyed, and the excellent, in my opinion, underappreciated parkour mechanics that really do add a lot to Sonic's moveset. The game has a strong start. The first few levels are pretty straightforward and a fun experience, but level design problems and absolutely atrocious frame rate do rear their ugly fat heads by the second world. The game designers decided to pad out the levels and make them longer than necessary, a common issue with some of these handheld games, with really obnoxious puzzle elements and locking up progression to killing a certain number of enemies that you need to painstakingly search for. This claustrophobic sand palace level, in particular where the weird rocks follow you, they need to press buttons for you to let you progress, this is when I knew this game was absolutely screwed despite the good foundation. I really do hold Shadow the Hedgehog near and dear to me for various reasons. I really do love the edgy hedgy solo adventure, guns and all, but I really can't begin to pretend like it's even close to a good game. The content and the ridiculously edgy story are truly something to behold. The game itself is okay-ish if you play it on the neutral route. It largely just feels like a relatively boring Sonic game with some literally bullet spongy enemies that's over before you know it. But it's when one of the millions of other story paths come into play that this game really falls apart. It typically comes down to things like, kill all the aliens in the level. And if you keep missing one fucking alien, you'll be running around the stage in circles and circles and circles over and over and over fucking again. Some of the later stages are just so overly complicated. They can take well over half an hour, which is absolutely insane for a Sonic game. Should I be calling the police? Knuckles Chaotix on the beloved Sega 32X is a massive waste of potential. Knuckles really deserved better than this for his first and only solo adventure. I will say that the graphics are absolutely gorgeous and so colorful, and this game's soundtrack is so nice and chill. It's also cool to see the origins of Team Chaotix. Despite the game's issues, I do still find it to be vaguely fun as a curiosity. The strange ring tether mechanic and repetitive claustrophobic level design really do make things feel more frustrating than fun. The physics just aren't there, and you'll always find yourself being held back by your partner character in just every single way. The game should have honestly skipped the stupid ass 32X Genesis growth, been given some improvement, and turned into a Sega Saturn launch title. I think the game could have ended up being at least marginally better that way. Considering this game reuses the same maps for 5 acts per stage, I think it's pretty easy to say that this game was probably a victim of rushed development. Sonic Drift 2 is just slightly better than the first game. It's basically the definitive version of Sonic Drift 1. Gameplay is a bit better, it's honestly a decent handheld racer for the time. There's really just not a lot to it going back to it these days. It has more characters, more course variety. I thought it was a bit of fun, but it just kind of exists. Gosh, Sonic Drift is so much fun! It makes me want to merge without looking! Sonic R is honestly funny. Instead of actually releasing a fully 3D Sonic platformer to truly show off what the Saturn could do, Sega was like, nah, let's just release Sonic R, a half-baked racing game with barely any content and very questionable controls. And they decided to do it well after the release of Mario Kart 64, quite possibly the best racing game at the time. Sonic R isn't a good racer in the slightest, but it's honestly kind of a fun novelty to mess around in. I have good memories playing this one with my family. Oftentimes we just run around the tracks and chase each other. We didn't really even pay attention to the racing element at all. Honestly, the biggest and only thing really putting this game over Sonic Drift is the wonderfully corny soundtrack. It's corny, really corny, but I've really come to appreciate it over the years. It's so upbeat and catchy, and I don't think you can help but fall in love with it. Can you hear sunshine? It's a bright up day. Don't you think something is bring us all? Sonic 4 needed a sequel, apparently, and that came to us in the form of Sonic 4 Episode 2. This game honestly has a lot of the same issues as the first episode, but it does have some welcome improvements. It definitely looks nicer, and the physics do feel a little bit better this time around. That's all I can really say though. It's a slightly improved version of a shit game. Not exactly high praise. Alright, I'm gonna give you one last chance, Mr. 8-Ball. What's your opinion on women in politics? Hey, come back here, you ungrateful sphere fuck! You might be surprised to see Sonic the Hedgehog, released on the Xbox 360 game console in 2006, this high on the list. Yes, I know that most things about this game are absolute rancid garbage. I'm not gonna go that far into what makes this game so fucking bad. At this point, so many critics, so many people have covered this game to death. I'm sure most of you are already fully aware of what the game is like. But the absolute terrible qualities of this game, honestly, that's what makes this game such a really fun time to me. The story is absolutely hilarious. It's so ridiculous. The glitches can be so unpredictable and fun to mess with. It's absolute wacky nonsense that's a wonder to behold. And you know what? I'll take ironic enjoyment and fun over functional boredom any day of the week. But considering, yes, I fully admit this game is absolute fucking garbage in most aspects, even though I probably enjoy it more than a few of the games listed above it. For that reason, I could not rank it any higher than this on good conscience. But get some friends with you and play Sonic 06. I guarantee you'll have a good laugh. Sonic Boom Fire and Ice was the final attempt at a Sonic Boom game, and you know what? This one was actually a bit surprising. It still isn't particularly great, and it still has some of the same issues as the previous Sonic Boom games, but they did implement some welcome improvements to make this final entry at least somewhat worthwhile. The biggest improvements come with the updated structure of the game and level design. Levels are a lot more fast-paced and no longer take up to 15 minutes to complete. And gathering items is no longer required to progress, thank God. And while the titular Fire and Ice power switching mechanic isn't anything crazy, it does add some much needed variety to the franchise. The Sonic Boom series lasted longer into this ranking than I honestly thought it would before I played these ones. Sure, Fire and Ice was better than I expected, but even then, good riddance. Sonic and the Black Knight is honestly exactly what I expected to see from a Sonic platform on the Wii. A linear experience with some wacky waggling. It's very similar to Sonic and the Secret Rings. It is in the same storybook series, but with more of a mission structure and sword combat. It's okay, I guess. I really just personally couldn't get into this one, unfortunately. It really comes down to I just couldn't get into the waggle combat or the mission structure here. I just didn't really see how it benefited gameplay and would make anything more fun. I really can't think of much else to say about this one, to be honest. Sonic Pinball Party. It's fucking pinball. Okay, fine, I'll say something else too. It's pinball. It's pretty cool that there's representation from Knights and Samba de Amigo. And I am particularly fond of Creepypasta Tales. Sonic the Fighters is a pretty fun little fighting game based on Sega's popular Virtua Fighter engine at the time. I had a good time with this one. It really isn't bad, there's just not a whole lot to it in my book. It has some really fun one-off characters and such, including Honey the Cat. I love Honey the Cat! Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. It's a fun little puzzle game. It's literally just Puyo Puyo with a Sonic series skin put on it to try and make it more appealing to Western audiences, I'd assume. Heck, the same thing happened to Kirby on the SNES around this time too. It's Puyo Puyo. I'm sure there's been better entries since, but it's solid. I do really appreciate the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog Robotnik representation though. What a sexy, sexy man. Sonic and the Secret Rings has a lot of flaws, but I still think it's a fun game at its core. It was the first Sonic game for the Wii, so they had to make absolutely sure that the game was all ripe and ready for motion controls. Whoa! And as such, it does have some major control problems, but it's still mostly playable and can be a fun time. I'd say that most of the stages are quite memorable. The biggest issue in my eyes is that you have to unlock smoother controls by leveling up in the game. That was an absolutely terrible decision. And the controls, they work alright when you're moving forward or to the side, but don't you even fucking dare try walking or hopping backwards to reach an objective. Oh wait, the game makes you do this constantly. Yeah, it's not great, but hey, I really do like the stages and the music, and it's generally pretty playable. It's kind of alright. Tails Sky Patrol is one of Tails' few solo outings on the Game Gear. It's not that great, but I do honestly think that this game is pretty charming. The biggest issue is that even just ever so slightly dry humping the wall will kill you instantly. Especially with how relentless enemies can be and how defenseless you are, this can get pretty frustrating pretty dang quick. But I think the game's charm keeps it higher up for me. Plus, I really do enjoy how intuitive it is to use Tails' ring to pick up items and cling to obstacles on the fly. Did Tails deserve better? Absolutely. Maybe we'll see something better pop up later on this list? Sonic Rivals is a pretty decent and fun platformer for the PSP where you race another character across a course. I honestly don't have a lot to say about this one. It really doesn't have quite as much going for it since it's not a full-fledged platforming adventure. But it really isn't half bad. It's decent enough fun to pick up and play in short bursts. And Sonic Rivals 2 is nearly exactly the same, just with some more characters, courses, and improvements to the gameplay. It's pretty good. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Game Gear. I really do enjoy most of the core 8-bit Sonic platformers on the Game Gear and the Master System. I really do believe that they deserve more respect than just being overshadowed by their big brothers on the Genesis. While Sonic 2 is at the bottom of the pack for me, aside from Sonic Blast, the game is perfectly functional, and it really does play great. The only real reason it's ranked so low is, I'm really just not a big fan of the stages here. They just aren't that memorable, and especially if you're playing on the Game Gear, screen crunch will lead to so many leaps of faith and to instant death. I'm also not really a big fan of the weird vehicles they introduced in this one, and the soundtrack is one of the weaker ones on the Game Gear. Overall though, this really was a decent effort. Sonic Battle is cool. I played it for the first time while making this list, and it was honestly a pleasant surprise. It's a fighter with surprisingly good 3D graphics for the Game Boy Advance and excellent sprite work. It almost feels like a more limited Power Stone, simply due to the limitations of the GBA, of course. I really dig the sketchy art style, and I've heard really good things about the story mode if you play it from front to back. This game seemed really solid. I would have definitely loved the heck out of this one if I had it as a kid. I'll definitely be returning to this one sometime. You know, I honestly feel like Sonic 3D Blast gets more hate than it deserves. Yeah, it wasn't the 3D Sonic experience that Sega really needed at the time, but you know what? I think it's a pretty fun time. It's pretty much the fun, not shitty version of Sonic Labyrinth. That's gotta count for something, right? I honestly enjoy exploring these levels to find flickies and reach each end goal. I also really enjoy the aesthetics of each stage here. It's definitely slower paced than your average Sonic game, but it's not so painfully slow or hard to control that it becomes unfun. My personal preference here would be the Sega Saturn version. The visuals are a decent improvement, and that CD soundtrack is just immaculate. Sonic Unleashed is an interesting beast. Not gonna lie. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. I'm so sorry. It was Sonic's first ever 3D foray into the more linear boosting gameplay that Sonic Rush introduced. And don't worry, I really do enjoy the HD version of the game, which is coming up later in the list. This spot is reserved for the pretty decent standard definition version of the game on Wii and PS2. It has similarities to the HD version, but unsurprisingly, it's massively scaled back for these versions. This version just feels lacking in a lot of ways. The daytime stages don't feel quite as fun in design or varied, and some of the stages are just completely missing. The open world segments feel pretty pointless when it's just a bunch of JPEGs. The worst part here is that the Hedgehog stages, which were already a point of contention for the HD version, are even more bland in this version. It's pretty decent, but the HD version is honestly much better. Team Sonic Racing is the most recent Sonic racing game to date, and it's very similar to the Sega All-Stars racing games we got during the 360 and PS3 generation. Team Sonic Racing uses the same great kart racing base, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that I think it's the weakest of these games. I just kinda miss the variety of racers and tracks that the overall Sega theming gave us, as much as I love the Sonic cast of course. And the team aspect of the gameplay just didn't really add anything to the game experience for me that I really liked. But this is a really solid kart racer. Sonic Spinball is a really good pinball adventure as long as you stay the fuck away from the options menu. I've always found this game to be a really fun time, even if it gets way too hard fairly quickly. This game is Sonic Pinball done right. It does actually have some really interesting and dynamic level design. I like how large the levels are here, and you even get little bits of platforming, enemies, and even boss fights. The biggest issue, like I mentioned, is how hard this game gets just by level 3 or 4. Seriously, this machine level is absolute sadistic nonsense. Other than the difficulty though, and some small issues with the physics, This is exactly what I'm looking for in a Sonic pinball game. It's quite a bit of fun. Definitely be sure to go for the Genesis version though. The Game Gear version is pretty much the same game, but it's not as good. Sonic Chaos is our next Game Gear platformer, and I'd say this one's pretty good. Things have definitely been refined a bit game design wise, and I do find the level design and music to be more enjoyable this time around. The biggest issue I have with this one is that it's just a bit too simple and easy. All of the stages are a breeze and the bosses are a complete joke, but I really do love that new art style going on here. I mean, look at how cute and stubby Sonic looks. Aww. It definitely isn't the best, but I'd say it's definitely worth a playthrough. Oh, Sonic Generations on 3DS, how easy it is to forget that you exist. While it definitely doesn't quite match up to the console version, the handheld version of Generations is quite good. I really enjoy how this version has completely different stages imported from other Sonic titles. I'm really glad they didn't just go the lazier route and use the same stages as the console version. I think that adds a lot of value to this version. This is a solid, fast-paced platformer. I'd mostly recommend it to anyone who's already played and enjoyed the console version first. Sonic Colors is a really great game, and I'm happy to report that it's quite the fun experience on DS as well. If you're already familiar with the Sonic Rush games, which funnily enough started the whole boosting gameplay loop in the first place, the devs basically took the console version and shrunk it down into a DS cartridge by using the same Sonic Rush engine again. And it's a lot of fun, and it adds some really cool mechanics the Rush games didn't have, like wall jumps and whiz power-ups. For me, it's the weakest of the Rush type games simply because it's not fully original like the first two Rush games. That's something I personally prefer. But just like those games, it has some really fun and creative level design and some cool 3D bosses. I honestly really enjoyed the Wii U version of Sonic Lost World. It may be infamous for having one of the worst stories in Sonic game history, but the game itself is really a lot of fun for the most part. I already praised the parkour mechanics like in the 3DS version, and I think that most of the level design here is a lot more fun and fits better with the controls. Aesthetically, I think the worlds could have been a little more imaginative, and yeah, it's not Sonic at its finest, but it really was a nice break from the boost style gameplay, and I really appreciated that. It's far from perfect, but I didn't have the same major level design issues like I did in the 3DS version. I'm happy to report that Lost World on the Wii U is not a complete disaster. Sonic Riders Zero Gravity is guaranteed not to result in permanent ass injury. Zero Gravity is just a really solid racing game. I still personally prefer the deeper and more complex mechanics of the original, but I can't deny that Zero Gravity is a really fun time. Gone is the limited air mechanic, basically this universe's fuel equivalent, and now we have some decent anti-gravity mechanics instead. We get a gravity drift to help with making sharp corners in a flash, and a gravity dive to get a temporary boost through some more straightforward sections of the track. They're pretty fun to use, though I like the more skill-based drifting mechanics of the original just a little bit more. But seriously, the courses and the gameplay are a lot of fun. I'd definitely say it's one of the best Sonic racing games out there. Sonic Heroes might be the first game on this list that I would likely consider a true classic. I have some issues with it, don't get me wrong, but it's just such a fun 3D Sonic adventure that expands on the adventure games before it. This time around, you're given 4 different teams of Sonic Heroes to play with. While it is cool to be able to play as all these characters, it also brings about my biggest issue with the game. We really didn't need 4 different teams playing through the same exact levels in the same exact order. That does make a full 100% playthrough very repetitive, but at the very least, that's not really necessary if you don't want to do it. If you want to just casually enjoy the game, just pick a team, primarily Team Dark or Team Sonic I'd recommend the most. Of course Team Sonic's named after himself, cocky little fuck, and have a blast. The team mechanics aren't that invasive, and most of the stages are fast-paced and fun. Some of the later stages can be a real slog, especially since they focus more on the underwhelming combat elements, but these issues really don't put Sonic Heroes down that much. It is quite the good game despite its flaws. Hey, Mr. 8-Ball? I miss you, Mr. 8-Ball. Tails Adventure is finally a game that's truly worthy of our favorite little fox dude. Unlike any other Sonic game on the planet, this one's structured like a Metroidvania game with large exploratory stages. This is a game that I definitely intend on getting back to. It's a really charming little Game Gear title. I'm really glad that the devs gave a Tails game the effort it deserves. I just love Tails' walk cycle, it's so fucking cute! And who doesn't love throwing live explosives at birds? Sonic Pocket Adventure on the new Geo Pocket Color feels kinda like an early prototype equivalent of Sonic Mania. It just has a bit too much bias towards remaking Sonic 2 stages, but it's like a remixed semi-original adventure utilizing elements from the original Genesis games. This is the first handheld Sonic game ever that really felt like it largely nailed the physics and level design of those classic titles. This is the absolute best Sonic had ever played, sounded, and looked before the more advanced handhelds came out. One odd little issue that I found, while the remix music does sound really good, they decided to pull random tracks from stages that don't really match the visuals of the levels you're playing. That was a little distracting, but the only major thing that's really keeping this game lower on the list is Sonic Mania is just so much better, and it does something exactly like what this game was doing, just in a much more interesting way. But if you're a big Sonic fan, like me, and you're interested in seeing how Sonic played an obscure handheld like the Pocket Color, I'm glad to say you'll definitely have a pretty good time with it. It just won't make a massive impression. The Sonic Advance games on GBA freaking rock, dude. Like sure, the series was struggling in some ways on console, but the handheld games in this era were largely stellar. The devs really nailed the bright and slightly edgier style for Sonic on the GBA. What they ended up going with here just feels so right for both the Sonic series and the Game Boy Advance. My bottom pick for this awesome trilogy would personally be Sonic Advance 3. Advance 3, weirdly enough, is the only one that I actually have any nostalgic connection to, because it's the only one I owned as a kid. It's a very good, fast-paced Sonic game. The acceleration of Sonic's movement just feels a bit slower than usual, but I still think it feels really good, so I really think it works in the end. Honestly, the only thing keeping this one in particular at the bottom are things such as the completely pointless and lifeless hub worlds between levels. Not much in particular happens in them, you just kinda jump and run in cramped environments until you find the next stage ring. It's really just a time waster. And after revisiting this one, I just personally prefer the level design of the other two games. I feel like some of the levels here are just a tad overly complicated and a bit frustrating. The flow of gameplay just isn't quite the same, especially when compared to Advance 2. Sonic Rush Adventure is a really great sequel to Sonic Rush on the DS. It's pretty neat that the scale of the story felt bigger this time around, but that's also where some of my small issues with this one come into play when compared to the original. The same great, insanely fast-paced and exciting gameplay is here with the same fun and crazy level design. This game introduces some more mini-games involving the stage traversal, and they're honestly perfectly fine. They just feel like a distraction. That, and while the soundtrack still slaps pretty hard, there's just no way it could ever live up to a Hideki Naganuma's masterpiece of a soundtrack from the first game. The original Sonic the Hedgehog on the Game Gear. Is the Genesis original that most are extremely familiar with the better game? Sure, but for Sega's first ever attempt at a Sonic game in 8-bit, made simultaneously with the more advanced version, they managed to make a very charming and overall well-made little platformer here. The control feel honestly doesn't feel that off at all. And damn it, I just really love the original stages this version of the game offers. Somewhat similarly to the Genesis version, this game isn't particularly fast-paced, but I feel like the stages offer a fair and fun platforming challenge. And sure, as much as I enjoy this one, Labyrinth Zone still fucking blows, and it's always sad missing out on the spin dash. But let's just say that stages like Bridge Zone and Jungle Zone will be living in my head rent-free for a long time, thanks largely in part to the level design that I honestly sometimes find even more satisfying and less frustrating and annoying than in the Genesis version. And the music, man, it's so unbearably catchy. Sonic 1 Jungle Zone, you didn't need to be such an earworm. I honestly prefer the first Game Gear game's simplicity when compared to Sonic 2 Game Gear's flawed and sometimes frustrating attempts to make the level design more complex. Sonic Riders, in my eyes, is the premier Sonic racing game, but it definitely isn't going to be for everyone. Riders is complicated, like a lot more complicated than you would ever probably expect from a Sonic racing game. It really isn't like a casual kart racer. We're doing futuristic hoverboarding shenanigans. This is serious business, guys. Tricks can be tricky to pull off. Drifting and fuel management really take a long time to get used to. To have fun with this game, you really need to master the mechanics, balancing going fast while also managing your fuel, and there's a lot of other elements to keep in mind that I'm not even going to be mentioning here. We're not looking at your typical easy to pick up, tricky to master here. This game is hard to pick up and very tricky to master. But if you're willing to put in the time and figure out how this game works, it's seriously insanely satisfying. You are probably going to get frustrated with it at first, but I personally think this game is really worth digging into. It's stylish and fun as hell when you know what you're doing. And I honestly just find it more exciting and engaging than Sonic just driving in a cart. If I had one major complaint, it would have to be at just look how much longer it takes to select Eggman. What a pointless, minuscule inconvenience, not even worth mentioning. I think that a lot of your enjoyment of Sonic Unleashed HD really just depends on how much you enjoy or can tolerate the slow-paced Werehog beat-em-up style nighttime stages. Similarly to the Wii PS2 version, the daytime Sonic stages are really where this game shines. But I will say that while I don't personally love the Werehog stages here either, I do find them to be a good time at points. They're definitely more varied and visually interesting here. I just feel like most of these Werehog stages last way too long. It just sucks that you only really get to play as Sonic himself for the duration of like a 5-minute stage, and then you're stuck playing as the Werehog for up to 20 minutes at a time. But I really just can't deny that those Sonic stages are so good. These stages are still to this day a visual spectacle, and they're probably still the best 3D boost style Sonic stages made to date. But unfortunately for me personally, the Werehog, while not god-awful in any way, just keeps the game down a bit for me. This game also has a massive, really annoying as fuck issue with requiring that you find easily missable medals in every stage to progress. So yeah, Sonic Unleashed may have some massive flaws that do legitimately annoy me, but I just can't deny that there's a really excellent and exciting game lurking beneath. We're finally capping off the Game Gear games with absolute cream of the crop. Sonic Triple Trouble. Sega really seemed to have learned from the mistakes they made with the past Game Gear titles here, and they honestly made a game that I feel stands equally in quality along those famous Genesis games. Gameplay-wise, it feels nearly exactly like what you'd expect on the Genesis. And they finally have some actually well-designed bosses going for once. From the visually pretty and insanely memorable Sunset Park, with its really unique train boss, to what is honestly one of the better and less frustrating water levels of the Sonic franchise, this game has a lot going for it. It's actually a real banger. It feels kind of like the ultimate culmination of what the Game Gear titles were going for the entire time. Unlike previous games, very little seems compromised here. Gameplay's smooth, even things like loop-de-loops don't feel janky or weird. It's simply a really good Sonic platformer. Sonic Advance was Sonic's introduction to the GBA, and we have a damn good game here. A lot of the positives I mentioned in favor of Sonic Advance 3 still apply here. But in this game, I really do feel that the level design is a bit smoother and more fair, less frustrating than in Sonic Advance 3. It just feels like it matches the fast-paced action the Advance series gave us just a little bit better. Plus, with this being the first game, level ideas just felt a little bit fresher at this point too. The original Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Genesis. If there's any Sonic game you've likely played before, it's probably this one. And because of this, I'm not going to say a whole lot. It's obviously a classic, and it really does deserve that status. There have absolutely been better Sonic games since, but the first game still stands as such a simple and fun time. The biggest issue I have going back to the first game is that some of the level design is definitely not built around Sonic's speed whatsoever. That's probably why, as sad as it is, people don't tend to remember past Green Hill Zone. The platforming tends to become a lot more claustrophobic and slow-paced than you might expect by the second level. However, I personally just don't really mind it that much. I'd say the original is still a very fun time overall, and some later levels like Spring Yard and Starlight Zone really do mix the speed and platforming pretty well. Sonic Advance 2 was the only Advance Trilogy game I hadn't played before making this video, and honestly, I think it might be my favorite of the trilogy. I don't have a lot to say about this one when compared to the others, but what it really comes down is just level design, really. These levels just flow so well, they're fast, but do still take careful timing and skill to go through. Things in this one are just always fast and always such a thrill ride. Sometimes it feels as fast as the Rush games without even really needing the boost system, which is pretty commendable. Sonic Colors was insanely exciting for a lot of Sonic fans, including myself when it first dropped. It felt like a real trip back to basics, which many people do feel was needed at the time. I personally enjoy Sonic's extended cast and when the series tries new things, but I feel like cutting things back really did help towards making a very fun game here. Colors basically just snagged the excellent daytime stage gameplay from Sonic Unleashed and turned it into the full game. This game is a bit lacking in interesting events or any sort of intrigue from trying interesting things. It's really just a straightforward, often 2.5D platformer, more often than you might expect anyway. Those things in particular are what keeps it from topping some of the previous 3D Sonic games for me personally. It could honestly just have a bit more going for it. But admittedly, I do prefer issues such as that when compared to any extreme, crazy, game-breaking glitches or unnecessary gameplay distractions. It's all Sonic all the time, and that works for me as much as I miss being able to play as Sonic's friends too. Sonic Generations just barely edges out Sonic Colors, likely just for nostalgic reasons if I'm gonna be completely honest. The new completely 2D classic Sonic stages are solid. Even if the physics and controls are just a little bit wonky, I still think they work pretty well. And the modern Sonic stages overall are just as good as ever here. I really just love seeing all these classic stages all the way back from Genesis to the Wii get a modern facelift, with some really damn nice visuals at the time and some absolutely killer remixes of some old favorite tracks. In my opinion, level design isn't perfect in this era of Sonic, but Unleashed, Colors, and Generations typically knew how to keep things challenging, but fair for the most part. And the stage length tended to be just about right, with a lot of cool stuff happening before the stage ends. If I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't even really that tired of this formula after Generations. I really would have been down to potentially see more of it. It really comes down to specific level design flaws, among other issues that make Sonic Forces fall so flat in its face. Oh geez, there I go ranting about Sonic Forces again. I really just can't let that one go, can I? Sonic CD has in the past been heralded by some as the best Sonic game of all time. While I personally don't agree with that assessment, it is a really great classic Sonic 2D platformer. Sonic CD features more varied and involved stages when compared to the original game, and the CD quality soundtrack, especially the original Japanese version, oh boy, that shit is just fire. It's just wonderful. The core of Sonic CD is just as good as any other classic Sonic game around the same time. The biggest issue with this game is a common issue for the Sonic franchise, and that's going to be level design. It's just a bit too labyrinthine and overly confusing for its own good. These levels really didn't need to have like 15 fucking layers, and that's not even factoring the time travel mechanic that's also involved too. I always just tended to ignore the time travel as best I could. It's a really cool concept, and it's really pretty neat to see how different these stages look in the future and past versions and all that. But it just adds some more over complexity to the game, but it honestly just didn't really need that when the levels are already like insane crazy mazes in the first place. But the quality really is there, and it's just classic Sonic fun. Sonic Rush was the first time we ever saw the now very familiar boosting, insanely fast gameplay in the Sonic series. And in my eyes, Sonic Rush is still the purest and best implementation of this style to this day. The main stages themselves are just as good as in Sonic Rush Adventure, for the most part just without those distracting minigames and all that. I also really love the trick system that's primarily used to gain boost power in this one. I think the timing and sometimes precision necessary to pull these things off is more interesting than just collecting wisps or rings. Honestly, the only major flaw that bothers me that I could think of in Sonic Rush is when the game traps you in a room with a few boring enemies to fight in some levels. I can admit that is needless padding for some of the stages, but I just can't help but love this game to death regardless. It's so fun to pick up and blast through these stages. They're challenging, but I never found them to be insanely frustrating. And I can't not mention the soundtrack by Hideki Naganuma. He's one of my favorite game composers of all time. His funky and intense electronics sample-based soundtracks are always absolutely killer. I honestly consider this game's soundtrack to be a masterpiece. It really elevates this game to another level. Each track really just gives each stage another level of personality that you just don't see in most games. Sonic Motherfucking Adventure 2. Yeah, I just can't help but love the adventure games despite their flaws. Unlike a lot of later Sonic console games, I really like that the adventure games really felt like, you know, an adventure. There were stakes at hand. Every level and character interaction really felt like it amounted to something. Sure, of course there were growing pains with the early 3D, especially when it came to presentation, but it personally feels to me like Sonic Team really did put a lot of heart and soul into these two games. As silly and ridiculous as things can get in these games, the characters all feel like they're in top form here. You can really feel the severity of these stories because the characters themselves largely take it completely seriously. The Sonic and Shadow stages are an absolute blast. The Sonic gameplay just still to this day feels so smooth. I like that it doesn't feel like a chore simply going backwards. I actually find the mech combat stages of the Eggman and Tails levels fun too. It's simple and arcadey. I also don't really mind the emerald hunting stages, but it's just unfortunate that the radar was completely fucked after the original game. In Adventure 2, Sonic Team decided to cut the overworld segments in between stages. Now, while I understand the decision, I personally feel like it was a bit of a shame, but I will of course explain myself so I don't sound like a complete hypocrite for criticizing Sonic Advance 3 for its hub worlds. The open world segments really felt like a living, breathing world, especially for 1999 standards. It was just fun being able to explore these hubs as different characters and find secrets, and I really dig how certain events, cutscenes, and bosses could happen in this open world. Okay, enough about that. This is about Adventure 2, not the first game. What Adventure 2 definitely has over the original is that its story definitely hits harder, with the same great gameplay. I'll never forget that ending, man, that's for sure. Which should have stayed canon, by the way, but that is another argument for another day. And then of course from here, Sonic Adventure. I love this game for a lot of the exact same reasons as Adventure 2, and I already did go over why I personally enjoy the hub worlds in this one. I find them very charming. Sonic's first true foray into 3D is still my absolute personal favorite. Sonic stages are a lot less frustrating, and Amy and E102 stages I find pretty fun too. Big the Cat stages suck a fucking big one, but it's such a small part of the game that's kinda just whatever. The meat and potatoes of this campaign are Sonic stages, and they're pretty much just as good as in Sonic Adventure 2. These two games have absolutely amazing music, some of the best in game history, and it's fun just being able to have the freedom to tackle these stages in any way you want, whether the game design was intentional or not in some parts. Sonic Mania was crafted by a team of fans that really understood what made the series so fun and beloved in the first place. It remixes some old stages in some truly amazing ways, and god, the new levels are just stellar. Sonic Mania is honestly just so cool, because it kind of feels like what we could have gotten if Sonic Team had made a 2D Sonic title for the Saturn. The soundtrack just matches that vibe, to be honest. I'm so glad they decided to ditch that horrendous fake Genesis Sonic 4 style of music. Instead, they went for some brilliant and real clean sounding tracks that are now some of the best in the Sonic canon. This really is the perfect Sonic game in a lot of ways, masterfully designed with care from top to bottom. If this is someone's favorite Sonic game, I could honestly completely understand. It remixes some of Sonic's best all-time stages ever, and the new stages are just amazing. Even the special stages are fun as hell. For a longtime fan like me though, nostalgia honestly isn't everything, and the old stages are what keeps this game back a little bit. I really do love the old school style, but I just want to see some more original stages from these brilliant level designers. If we can get a Mania 2 someday with completely original stages, music, and more, I will fully admit that that could potentially end up being the greatest Sonic game that Sonic Team never made. But until then, we have this gorgeous and so fun love letter to previous games. Here we go, guys, the top 3. Starting off with Sonic and Knuckles on the Sega Genesis. If I'm going to be completely 100% honest, these last 3 games are pretty interchangeable. They're honestly all amazing. Sonic and Knuckles is Sonic on the Genesis perfected. The graphics, beautiful and detailed. Music, absolutely excellent, though I do feel it's missing a bit of that Michael Jackson sample flair that I really loved in Sonic 3. But in reality, it's all just the awesome ending of Sonic 3! Sonic 3 and Knuckles, when combined, really do in many ways make for the best Sonic experience of all time to this day. They're essentially the same game, just a really damn long Sonic game when combined. These games are insanely ambitious for the Genesis. The devs just couldn't find a way to put it all in one cartridge as originally intended, so they were released separately. My personal favorite set of levels out of the 2 are the ones in Sonic 3, and I have a very extremely slight preference for its soundtrack. But this pair of Sonic games is so fucking iconic and amazing that even people who aren't typically Sonic fans I think can really enjoy it. We've got more detailed and expansive levels than ever before, events happening in stages, mid-bosses, and a whole lot more stuff here. Starting from Angel Island and climbing all the way up to beating the shit out of Eggman and his Death Egg. It's just such a great adventure from beginning to end. God, this game just really rocks just as much now as it did back then. These games even have the best original special stages in the series. Who doesn't love those blue spheres? It's just Sonic perfection. I can barely even think of a negative thing to say about it. Even the water level in this game is fucking incredible. So, what could possibly be better than Sonic 3 and Knuckles? Well, that would be Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Sonic 2 took the overall fun gameplay and ideas that Sonic 1 laid down and ironed everything out perfectly. We have the introduction of things like the spin dash to make gameplay smoother and faster than the first game. Now if I'm gonna be honest, whether I could choose Sonic 2 or Sonic 3 and Knuckles as my number 1 might just depend on the day and how I'm feeling. It's extremely difficult to choose. While Sonic 3 and Knuckles expanded on the series even further, I just still find myself being such a big fan of the middle road here. The gameplay hasn't become more complicated yet, but things are a lot more fast-paced and interesting than what you see in the first game. The levels and bosses are really well designed. The graphics, while not as good as Sonic 3 of course, are a massive overhaul from Sonic 1. And Sonic 2 has some of my favorite levels of all time. I find stages like Chemical Plant Zone, Hilltop Zone, and Casino Night really still remain just in the top tier for me. But all 3 games here at the top are truly Sonic at his absolute finest ever. It's really just no wonder why the series became so popular with games this good. Now if I'm gonna be real with you all, Sonic 2 really means a lot to me. It was the first Sonic game that I ever played, and without it, I wouldn't be making this absolutely fucking insane video for y'all now. I wouldn't love this series as much as I do today. Call it rose-tinted glasses if you want. I don't really mind. Maybe it's somewhat true, but especially when the best Sonic games are all just so good, for the top games especially, the ranking really just doesn't matter that much. And no matter where the Sonic series goes next, I'll always love that funny little blue dude, and I'll be checking out his games for the foreseeable future. I just don't see that changing anytime soon. Godspeed, Sonic the Hedgehog. No matter what quality your upcoming games end up being, you've earned our respect. Godspeed.
Go fuck yourself, Metal.